So, first of all, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Bob Rosinsky. I'm a member of LPM. I'm a volunteer. Sometimes I run workshops. I've helped LPM with figuring out lighting and cameras and lenses. And I mean, I've been doing this in one form or another since I was 15, and I'm 66. So I've got a pretty long history. And I've worked in the video and film special effects and visual effects world, and I did that from the mid-'80s into the mid-'90s, and I got really burnt out. But my clients were ESPN, NBC,
Nice.
A lot of corporations like IBM and others. Bose was a big client. And then I took a 10-year hiatus and went into another field. And then after that, I opened up a photo studio and did that for 10 years. And I don't know, over the last few years, I've gotten back into video. Basically, what I like to do is how-to videos, you know, demonstrating, like one of my series is on, it's called Joel's Garden Academy. And what Joel does is he explains how you can grow certain types of things in your garden here in Colorado. So, and I do have a YouTube channel, and other than that, I think that gives you a pretty good background of who I am. And how many of you have had experience shooting video and photography, specifically working with getting headshots or head and shoulder shots? Okay. And I know you have.
I pretend.
Okay, so what I've got set up right now is just a basic 3-point lighting setup. And you know, I always kind of get a little squeamish when I hear the term 3-point lighting, because you can do a lot of things with 3 lights. You have a key light, you have a fill light, and you have a backlight. And that's the very basic configuration. So what I've got right now is a very basic configuration, and just to give you an idea, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Tim to sit in the hot seat just to show you what a basic light looks like, and then I'm going to tear everything down and explain how each of the lights work. And you know, if you have any questions, please feel free to chime in. And let me get the camera on. Yes. All right. And now I got to get the picture here. So I got a live feed from the camera. Okay. So turn on this light. And turn on this light. Okay. So.
What's the distance of these lights from the subject?
Ah, that's a good question. And why is it? Oh, okay. So the monitor on my camera and this monitor are basically showing you 2 different pictures. But this is a really basic light. It's not super refined, but you know, what we are looking for, see how he's got a highlight in the eye? You always want, you know, just a catch light, we call that. It just, you know, gives a little more sparkle to the subject. Another thing, notice I have Tim, he's sitting on a posing chair. I like, when I do interviews and when I do portraits, I like the posing stool because there isn't a back of a chair interfering with the picture. And another thing, you know, I like to have a background a lot of times that isn't just black or isn't just white. You know, and I like to blend sometimes natural light with artificial light. So right now, you know, I've got this kind of basic setup. You know, I've opened up the windows. You know, it's not as dead as it would be. And, you know, this is a pretty simple setup. So what I'd like to do now is give you an explanation of why I chose the lights I did. Does that sound like a good place to start? All right. Oop. And of course, there's always operator error. So I'm gonna turn on the lights, and thanks, Tim. I might call on you later. Perfect. Okay. So I don't need that right now. Okay. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start out by discussing the main light, the key light. And can any of you guess where the key light is? It's right here. Okay, so just very basic, what I like to do with the key light is I like to have it 45 degrees from the lens, both in terms of left and right position, 45 degrees, and up and down position, 45 degrees, 45 and 45. And that's really where you want to start. And I always have the key light higher than my subject, okay? And if a subject's wearing glasses, you really want to go up high, because the lower you go, the more chances you're going to catch that reflection in glasses, and that's very distracting. So what I'd like to do is kind of give you the anatomy of this light. This is a bigger version. But what I decided to go with is a softbox. And I'll explain that later on. But what I like about a softbox is it gives you a very nice, even, diffused illumination, okay? And I'll show you what it looks like if you go with a hard light. And you'll immediately see why it's a good idea to start out with a soft light if you're photographing a person. Now, we have these reflectors here, and these are called octaboxes. And the particular brand that LPM has is very good. This is a very high quality modifier. Anything that you use to put in front of a bare light bulb, you call a modifier, because it's modifying the light. And this is a pretty interesting piece of equipment because it's modular. Ellen Chrome. And, you know, there are a lot of good light modifiers out there. There's Angler, there's Elinchrom, there's I think Godox probably makes some good ones. Nanlite makes some good ones. I don't like the cheaper brands. You get what you pay for. But basically, what we have is a cone. And if I were to stick a light in here, and I do have a light here. I'm going to show you how, well, first of all, this is the light that LPM has. They have Godox lights. They're very nice. They're usually covered. You want to protect, you know, the light source very easily. This is called a Bowen's S mount. It's a very, very, very common mount. Not all mounts are the same. So this is a Bowen's mount. See how it's got the three? Okay. So I am just going to attach this here. There we go. It locks right on. And I'm going to, okay. I'm going to plug this in. And actually, maybe I will get you back on this stool there, Tim. Just to, let's get the camera back on. And let's get input. All right. There we go. Okay. So we've got nice soft light. Well, what's going to happen, I'm just going to move this out of the frame. What's going to happen if I put this light here without any of the diffusion material. And let me turn it on. I can never find the switch in the dark. That looks terrible. Whoops, hold on. Yeah, let's get the color balance right. So that's just a different effect. And you can go with the hard light, but I always like to start off soft. And see the difference? You know, it's harsh. And it's not particularly flattering, I don't think. I mean, do you guys have any comments on this?
You can see the light in his eyes, which is distracting.
Yeah. I mean, certainly you can light like this, but for a basic interview, you know, I think you're going to be better off just kind of softening it up. And in this case, I've got several layers that I can soften with.
Excuse me, is this a headshot for a photo or video?
Either or.
Either or?
Yeah.
Because you're not using flash.
No. No,
You
no,
never
no.
use flash for a headshot?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but
Okay.
more and more people are going to continuous lighting
Continuous lighting.
because LED lighting has gotten really good and really cheap. And what I like about LED,
Control it better.
yeah, and what I like about LED lighting is what you see is what you get. Now, I was trained on strobes. And, you know, with digital, strobes are very easy because you can always chimp and see what you shot. But I was trained on film. In film, I think you really had to have a little bit more skill, and also we used to use what are called Polaroids. So we'd take a Polaroid picture with our strobes and see how it looked, and if something was too bright or not bright enough, we'd make an adjustment. Well, sometimes you'd go through 10 or 20 Polaroids before you got it down. So, you know, being in the modern age, it's a good thing because it's much easier to control light, but on the other hand, it makes it has really democratized the process. More and more people are able to enter into doing this kind of work because it's a lot easier to light. And, you know, it's just kind of...
So these will do both flash and constant?
No, these are just constant. So, you know, so you have a couple ways you can adjust the softness with these. Like with these particular Elechrome lights, you've got 2 layers of diffusion. And what this does is it softens the light, so it's not quite, so the shadows aren't quite as intense. So I'm just going to plug this in real quick.
I have a question.
Sure.
Very beginner.
Mm-hmm.
What does he mean by flash versus constant?
Oh, okay. So have you ever seen a flash bulb, a camera with a, yeah, that's what a flash is. It's a very bright, instantaneous burst of light.
So you wouldn't combine the two, is what you're saying?
Well, if you're doing still photography, sometimes you can, but that's an entirely different can of worms. But actually, I do that when I photograph dogs because I want to kind of stop the action because dogs are kind of twitchy, right?
Right.
But I also want to have a nice even background that I control, so I'll mix both LED and strobe. And maybe I'll do a seminar on that someday, but that would be more of a workshop. But just, you know, trying to make this quick hour-long demo work. So with this, you know,
But you saw the strobe for models too.
yeah.
For that purpose, you said when you're editing, you just want that one shot, even though you took 1,000.
Well, it depends on how you shoot. I'm an economical shooter. You know, the fewer the better because then it's easier for the client to decide. They don't have as many choices. And, you know, something too, after doing this for so many years, I have a pretty good idea of what's going to work and what's not going to work. And I don't shoot fashion. That's a whole different thing altogether. And that's not my strength. So now we've got a little bit more diffusion. And you can see it's not as harsh.
No, much better.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I don't know.
Well, this is just the main light. Okay.
Is that still at 45?
Yeah, well, okay. That's pretty much it. Okay. And that's okay. And now I'm going to add, can you hit the light again? I'm going to add the outer layer, which will even give me more diffusion. And I'm doing a very soft light because, frankly, that's going to be your easiest light to control and to deal with. And as you get more experience, you can start mixing, different types of lights, hard and soft, different colors. But this is a really good, basic, easy setup. Sure.
So everything you're talking about is true for video as well as stills.
Yeah, the difference between video, sometimes people are going to be moving. So that's where it becomes a different situation. And in that case, I would probably use bigger lights just to cover, more space on the set. And, when you're lighting for video and you're going to have a little bit of movement, you're going to want to mark the floor so that you can, when you're lighting, you can have a good idea of how the talent is going to look as the talent moves from point A to point B or to point C. And that's a whole other different discussion. But so here we have even more diffusion, and if you could hit the light. But notice what's happening is I throw more and more diffusion, I have less light to work with. So I have to crank up.
Are you able to take the light out of the eyes through editing, or how?
You can, but to be honest with you, I like leaving that catch light in the eye because it adds some sparkle.
Oh,
And in fact, if there's a picture of a person, a portrait, and it doesn't have a catch light, I'll often put one in.
fun.
Just to, sparkle the scene a bit. And then finally, the last thing I want to show is on this particular main light that I have set up, I've got a grid. And let me show you what the grid does. First of all, I want to get that right.
That's cool.
So what the grid does is it makes the light more directional. Because when I take this off, now I just want to take off the grid.
Focus on the subject.
So I'll set this on the subject without. Okay. All right, go ahead. And so we have a lot of spill. The light's spilling all over the place. And actually, all I'm going to do with the grid is just make it so the light is more focused just on him, but it'll be the same quality as soft light. So let me go ahead and put the grid on, and then we'll and what you're going to find when you work with lighting in the studio is gaffer tape, which is the black tape. Okay, gaffer tape and extension cords are your friends because you're always going to want to tape things down. Like, I don't want this wire to pull out of the camera. Oftentimes I'll lock the camera down with a weight. Like earlier I bumped into it. Well, if I bump into it with a weight on it, it ain't going to move. So now I'm going to just put on, here, I'll show you. No, just trade it this way. So now I'm just going to put the grid on and Velcro. That's another one of your big friends in studio lighting. So, and the Velcro just attaches this. And it's always fun, you know, when you first start doing this, and especially if you have your client sitting on the hot seat, something's always going to go wrong. I've done this enough. Well, no, but so, you know, just, you know, be lighthearted about it. Don't let the heart beat, you know, get the best of you. Just be cool. Take a deep breath because, you know, until you're really familiar with the stuff, you might fight a bit with it. I always like to have a basic light set up before somebody walks into the room. And, okay, so now we've got our grid back on. And so we've really... Tricks of the trade. And right now, I have this mounted on what you call a C-stand. Why do they call it C-stand? Well, a company named Century, back in the 20s or 30s, came out with this very simple modular design where you have the feet, and I'll take one of these apart later on, and you have the regular stand itself. This is called a knuckle. This is the stand, those are the feet. Everything's modular. So this is the knuckle, and this is a rod. Okay, so...
Modular for transportation purposes?
Well, for adjusting light. There's so many different things you can do. I mean, these are like Tinker Toys. And maybe we'll get into a little bit of that later. But these are really modular. You can attach things to them, and that would be a more sophisticated class. I'm just going to keep this very simple. So now I have my key light. I'm happy with it. Again, I'm going to put it higher than my subject. And another thing to be aware of is you want to keep the reflection out of the window. Because watch this. See that? You're always going to want to keep an eye on that.
Unless you wanted to put a logo on it, that would be cool.
A what?
A logo.
Well, that would be a different light, so you'd have more control. Okay, so now we've got our key light. And, you know, actually it's not. You can get away with one light. This isn't horrible. You know, I'll brighten up the... So, you know, it's okay, but I think we want to fill in the side. So now we're going to look at the fill light. And basically what I've done with the fill light is it's got the octabox, the soft box. I've got 2 layers of diffusion in there. Remember I showed you the inside piece of fabric that I attached and the outside piece of fabric. So now I have a nice soft light. And you know what? I'm going to put the grid on this one too because I really want to be able to control the direction of the beam. I really want to keep it as controlled and as little light spilling off as possible. And you don't necessarily have to do this, but again, it's just something that, having done so many of these, I've found this to be a pretty good formula. And another thing I want to mention too is when you are setting up a shot for a portrait or an interview, the neutral position is where you have the lens pretty much even with the subject's eyes. So technically, that's a little more flattering. Because I'm not looking down. When you're looking down at your subject, you're sort of demeaning the subject. And you might want to do that for editorial reasons. I'm serious. And start looking at this when you see news footage. You know, if the subject is not somebody you agree with or is a megalomaniac, well, maybe you want to accentuate that by having...
But if he's paying you for the interview, you're going to demean him?
No. But see, the higher I go, you know, It's just, we're looking down at the guy. And, you know, I'd even go wider and just higher, even higher. I don't know if I can get this high enough to make that work, but really high.
Yeah.
Okay, and then on the other hand, if you want to make somebody look more prominent, you shoot up just a little bit because you don't want to get too much, you know, in the nose. And make sure your client's nose is clean. I'm telling you, you know,
Yes.
because I can't tell you how often I see nice portraits that people take and there's something going on in the nose. Now with Photoshop, fortunately, you can edit that out, but I like to shoot things as cleanly as possible because I really don't like editing. And here's another thing. So now we have a nice, you know, kind of head and shoulder shot. And, you know, that looks pretty good, so I'm going to turn off the light. So another thing I like to point out is I like to blur out the background. That just looks a lot better. See what happens when I, let me see if I can.
Did you say blur or border?
Blur. See, now the background is very sharp. So I don't think that's as flattering. You got a lot going on. You got the brickwork, which is not particularly complimentary. You don't want lines going into your subject or poles coming out of the subject's head. And the very, very far background, what's out the window, well, now we're paying attention to the cars going down the street. So what I like to do is keep that background as soft as possible.
How do you do that?
Okay, so are you guys familiar with f-stops? Okay, so an f-stop is an aperture, and I'm just going to give you a quick demonstration on how that works. So take your finger, put it close to your eye, and try to keep your finger and as far away as you can see in focus. And tell me if you can actually do that. So you're looking at your finger, you're trying to focus on your finger up close, while at the same time trying to keep the background in focus. Can you do that? Absolutely not. It's physically impossible. But if you make a little tiny hole like this, and you put your finger close to you and look at the background, everything's in focus.
Interesting.
Can you see that? Okay, so that's what I'm doing basically with the camera. I'm making it the hole really small, right? So now everything's in focus. Well, what did I do here? Where am I? Oh, I went into the, hold on, I got buttonitis. Let me see. Where am I? What did I do? Okay, there we go. Okay, so that's a really small hole right there, right? Everything's in focus. Well, now I'm going to make the big hole where you couldn't, where if you focused on your finger, the background went out of focus, or if you focused on the background, your finger went out of focus. Well, with the portrait, we want the finger to be in focus and the background to go out of focus. So I'm going to make that hole bigger, and that's called the f-stop or the aperture. And again, you know, I don't expect you to absorb all of this information because, you know, it takes a lot of practice.
So are you shooting at 5.6 or what's your aperture?
Right now, I'm at 2.8.
Okay.
I want to open it up as wide as I possibly can while still being able to main focus on the eyeballs, the nose, and the ears. So you want to be mindful of that. Okay, so right now I'm going to turn on the fill light, and I've got a grid up here. And I can play around with the brightness. Let's see.
Nice.
So now it's really bright. And that's, let me see. I'm just adjusting the shutter down. That's not very interesting. You know, it's like in a lineup. Okay? But if I turn this way down, how does that look? Tell me when it looks good.
You get more of a shadow.
Now? Okay. Does that look better?
It looks better, but
Okay.
there's still some shine on his forehead.
Yes, that's another point I want to bring up, powder. Powder is your friend.
Paper towel always works.
Paper towel, you want to grab me a paper towel? A rag, a dry, nice cloth. I always have powder with me if I'm shooting, and I try to get an idea of the person's complexion beforehand so I can match the powder. But if you want to go ahead and just, wipe off your forehead, and because everybody's going to get shine. You're in front of these lights. Chances are you might even be a little nervous. Well, people are going to perspire. I mean, that's what people
Right,
do.
what age you
Get
be
the whole
on it.
face, teeth and everything. Very good. Just wipe it, you got it
But
really.
what's wrong with a bit of shine?
Well, it's distracting.
Oh,
Now, if you're doing a scene where you're in a hot room in a film, then that's fine. In fact, you can even throw water on the person if you want for perspiration.
I have some, you ready?
No. Okay, so what I'm going to do, oops, I don't want to step on that. Let me see if I can. I don't mind having a little bit of shadow. How does that look? Okay, I'm going to start with 0.
We can also see it on the wall. The light.
Yeah.
bounces off the wall.
Oh, you can see it on the wall?
On the bricks.
Yeah, the bricks right here.
Oh,
That's for perfectionists though.
yeah, I mean, I can just move the light around to get rid of that. That's why I have the grid on here, because if I didn't have the grid on here, I'd get a lot more spill. Okay. So I still think I can pull this down a bit, just to,
Now, does the lighting outside affect what's going on in here?
not in here, it's just simply behind him.
Okay.
And I am kind of matching the levels, because if I made the lights really bright, the window scene would go dark. And we want a nice balance. And let's see, I'm gonna,
Is that backlight, you're gonna get to that?
yeah, if we have time, yes, I am gonna do the backlight. So,
We were using manual exposure, right? Here,
yes, and
fixed ISO and all that.
yeah, I generally shoot that way. So who does film and who does video and who does stills? Who does,
Still.
you do stills? And you, just either or, whatever. Good way to spend your lunch hour. Okay, and you're new to this?
yeah, I don't do anything. I'm just interested in learning some, beginning.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, Mary, you've
Both.
been around, I mean.
Yeah, I've been around.
Well, I mean, in terms of media,
I
yeah.
guess I'm in the wrong place now.
No, you're not.
Oh.
No, you're in the right place.
Always, remember what you
Yeah.
got in writing right there.
Yeah.
You gotta start.
Big things start small.
Well, that's exactly right. So I always tell people, start with one light and just play around with one light. Or even yet, start just going outside and trying to understand, if the sun's behind you, what does your subject look like? If the sun's behind your subject, well, what does that look like? Or if you want to get in the shade under a tree, what does that look like? Or on a cloudy day, what does that look like? Because really, the only way you're going to learn about lighting is to just start digging into it. And there are some good books and there are some bad books. There's some good YouTubes and there are some bad YouTubes. And what I'm telling you today is just from my experience. Somebody else with equal amount of experience might have a different way of doing things. It's not like math where, there's a correct answer or a wrong answer. Here we're dealing with aesthetics more than anything, and aesthetics are choice. I might want to put a colored gel in front of one of those lights to give the person some color. But what I'm doing today is just showing the most very, very basic way to light. Okay? So now I'm going to put up the backlight. No, thanks. And I'm going to open up.
Bob, you're trying to take my job.
Yeah,
I'm a light man now.
you're a light man.
Bob's
Okay.
so used to doing everything.
Okay. Notice too how he has now 2 catch lights.
Yeah.
And that's okay. it's a matter of taste and opinion. I don't mind 2 catch lights. A lot of people don't like that. And again, just if he looks into the lens, I can change the catch light. See how it changes? It should change where it's appearing. I don't know if it's really making.
The location going on.
Yeah, it should change. Or even if, you know. So I always look at the catch lights. And again, I'm kind of going, I set this light a little lower, and the reason I did that is because I want to eliminate the harshness of the shadow underneath his chin. You know, see how his head casts a shadow on his neck?
Yes.
We just want to kind of, if I had this light in the same position as that, it just, I don't know, it just, well, I can't get this one high enough. It just, I don't know, I think it just looks better if you can just have a little bit of difference between height. But your key light is always high.
So if you have that fill light at that level, face level,
Yeah,
you risk shadows on the backdrop?
you can always deal with that one way or another. One way is, well, I'm just going to move the light to the side. But I want to adjust accordingly. You have some freedom with the fill light. You don't necessarily have to put it 45, 45, and I can't really see what's going. Tell me when it looks good and tell me when it looks bad. That's bad. Okay,
Yep.
Good.
right there. Okay, so now I'm going to put a backlight, and I want to just explain a little bit about backlights. Aldo, can you get the light?
I got it.
Oh, thanks. Okay, so here we have, let me pull this off, our backlight. And the backlight is because maybe I want to light his shoulder or get a little bit of detail in his hair from the back. So, no, I don't know if I have enough wire. So what I have here, okay, let me get,
You can see the red in your hair, which is awesome.
oh shit, how come this isn't, oh, this is not on well. How did that happen? Oh, there we go. Okay. So, okay, just to give you an idea, that's pretty damn bright,
Right.
right? So that's not going to work. All right. So what I'm going to want to do is use, let me see if I have another reflector here. Yeah. So what I'm going to want to do is use a reflector, you know, to just this cone. What it does is it focuses the light. It's still a spotlight, but look what happens when I use this as my backlight. Let's see if I, here we go. Okay, go ahead. All right, that's pretty severe, wouldn't you say? I mean, even that is pretty severe, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm going to do to manage that is I'm going to take off just the reflector, and I'm going to put on 2 items. This is called a grid. And what the grid does is it really narrows the beam of light. It's like a honeycomb pattern. And these come in different sizes, where the honeycomb can be really large or really small. The larger honeycomb lets more light out, and the narrower honeycomb just makes the beam a lot more focused, but it really does dim the light down quite a bit. And they're always measured out. This is a 30-degree grid, but we have, there are 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 degrees. So like a 60 degree would be a bigger honeycomb, and like a 10 degree would be a tiny honeycomb. But what's nice is I can just insert this right into the reflector. So I'm going to put this on and just kind of show you how much better it is.
A
okay? But this is probably hard for you guys to look at, isn't it? Okay, so what I'm going to do to mitigate that is I'm going to put on these barn doors. And all this equipment that I'm showing you today is here at LPM. And there's nothing wrong with just renting out studio time and playing around with this stuff. That's how you're going to get familiar. And you know what? Don't expect perfection, because it never comes. Yeah, I've been doing this all my life, and it's never perfect. You just,
Life, Bob.
huh?
That's life.
That is life. You know, it's just degrees of acceptability. And that's kind of how I look at it. So anyway, now I'm going to put this back on. And let me see if I can do it in the dark. And this has a little tie-in. Thanks. You know what? It's going to be much easier to do like this. I just set it in, and there's this. There we go. Ta-da! And now I can use the barn doors to flag off the annoying light that is bothering. It would bother me setting up the shot to have this bright light. You know, I don't want to have a bright light in my eye when I'm trying to, work on, getting my subject lit.
I know this is a 3-point class, but is there any reason that you would not use that earlier?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes what I've noticed is if I'm shooting, I don't like that word shooting, if I'm photographing somebody with white hair, long white hair, I probably wouldn't do it, because why do I need to add more light to it? But with people with dark hair, you got to do it, because you want some separation between your background and your subject, and by having a little bit of light there, it just gives you an outline, and that's really all you're looking for. And you can experiment. Typically a backlight is higher up, and I'll show you why. Let me see, are we on? All right. Because if I have it low, it's just, I mean, you can do that, but I think when you have it higher up, let me get this higher up, I'm going to use the barn door. And you can also play around with the edge. You see how I'm playing around with the edge? And it really does change things. Does it? I can't see the monitor.
It does, right there,
Yeah, so tell me where you like it.
right there.
Okay,
A little bit more
a little bit more.
to the left.
Would you ever use a light on the ground behind him?
Yes, if you want to get some separation, something on the background, absolutely. I might want to put another light there. I don't need it right now because I got the windows giving me some nice light. But I could throw a color light back there, a gel, anything. And yeah, you can certainly add more lights. That's no problem. One thing I do want to say is when I light a situation, I do one light at a time. So a lot of times I've seen people, they turn on all the lights. Well, it's a lot harder to figure out what you're doing if you have all the lights turned on at the same time. And so let's shut it off, the light, and let's see what we got. And yeah, it's not bad. We got a little bit of highlight on his cheek. That's a hard light. That looks good.
Is that good?
Yeah, I like to, it depends on your subject. And it depends on the complexion of the person. It depends on us. Aldo, would you be okay with sitting there? So, everybody has a different color complexion, and I try to light accordingly.
Well, it's nice how it highlights his hair.
Yeah.
Inside, too.
Yeah.
Don't let me get my papers out.
But an actress or model wouldn't like that because you're looking at every detail of the skin.
Well, that's why I don't do fashion.
Oh, right?
It's just, usually with fashion, what they do is they have a really big soft box. So they have very broad light, and then maybe they'll use a couple harder lights to kind of accentuate it. Now let's see how we're doing with Aldo. Okay, so with Aldo, this becomes,
Glasses.
Yeah, but see his glasses, if I had this thing lower, there you go, so avoid that. So notice how I get high, up, and that's not bad. You know, the guy wears glasses, you know, acknowledge. You can always ask your subject to take the glasses off.
Otto, would you?
Al does.
Oh, Al.
And, you know, I might want to, but see, the lighting is basically the same, but I might want to reposition the backlight. Maybe, you know, I want it to be more, and usually I'll have a backlight hung up on the grid. Let's see how that looks.
Little shine in the head.
I got shine on his head. Oh yeah, ooh, that's way too much.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let me dim that way down. And I can also change the color. How does that look? Better. And I'm going to just put this more behind him. It's probably going to show up in the scene. It's fine. I would usually hang a backlight from the grid. And, oops. And I can also shape.
Al's got nice eyes.
Now I can see how I'm using the barn door now. Is that making a difference?
It is making a difference, right?
So where do you like it?
There.
Okay. So let's see how Aldo looks.
Dot on his forehead.
Oh, yes, there is. Where's that dot coming from? Well, it's coming from here. So we want to get rid of the dot. How's that? Still there?
Well, your light's partially in the screen.
That's, oh,
You could edit that out.
yeah, well, as I said, I would hang the backlight
Yeah.
up from the grid down. Because right now, to make it so it works with Aldo, well, there's one other thing I could possibly do. I could use a snoot. Let's see if we have a snoot around here. Because a snoot is exactly what, here we go. All right, so this is called a snoot. So what I need to do to make this work with Aldo, and I don't want the tripod to show, or the light stand to show in the shot, what I can do is really put a narrow beam. So now, it's funny, they call these things a snoot. And I find that a lot of people that get into this industry do so because they like the toys. And I'll tell you, I'm guilty of that.
Didn't you say Lego toys?
Legos. I loved Legos when I was a kid. And you know what? I would still love to play with some Legos. All right, let me get the light.
Get a picture.
You hear that, Aldo? She thinks you're a model.
You're a good-looking guy. I mean, I hate seeing myself. All right.
Tall.
Okay, how's that?
Beautiful. Good job.
Okay, so that pretty much shows you.
Take a look.
Oh yeah,
That's nice.
that's nice.
So the purpose of the backlight is to separate the head from background? Is
Well, let me turn it off. Let me turn it off and show you. I just think it's nice to get an outline. So what do you think? Is it better with or without?
It's better with it.
Yeah. And I could, if I could see what I was doing, I would refine it even more. I guess we have time for one more little demo. So here you go.
Fun.
This is it. Come and play.
I want to say a comment real quick
Yeah.
to Aldo. You look so regal right now. I see you in a royal robe. Your posture,
Well, it's because
facial
I've
expression.
posed him so well.
Yeah. No, it does
So-
have a
Lion's King.
a regal quality.
So,
You know?
And he's got a great voice.
oh, he's a good singer.
Yeah.
Actually, Aldo is one of these versatile people. He's a photographer, he's a singer, and he's does everything. And he's a
Videographer, I'm getting.
videographer.
Is it opera?
No.
Okay, because that's the.
So let me show you something about posing people. Sometimes what I like to do is have, if you could just pivot here. All right, now look into the camera with your face. Sometimes I like to play around with angles. It really changes, the feel of the picture. I don't really like shooting straight on. Like in an interview, I might be talking, to my interviewee over here, and maybe the subject looks at me and maybe occasionally looks at the camera.
Doesn't matter what side? Or is it
No.
You ever use 2 cameras?
Oh, yeah, and 3 cameras. Yeah, oh, sure. So right now, this is like the most simple light imaginable.
Yeah.
But if I had 2 people, this might even actually work for 2 people. Let me see if it does. I don't know. How do I look? Probably not as good because I didn't light.
Well, you're not in the scene.
Oh,
Yeah.
Here, let me go and you go look.
oh, okay. Yeah, you could. You could pull that off. See how Mary's hair is really glowing now?
Yes.
Maybe that's okay. Let me. Yeah. Yeah. Go back there. Now you have 2 different complexions here. So I would probably do a little bit of finessing with the backlight, but it works. I would want to be a little more critical with my fill light, just to massage it a bit, but it's possible to get 2 people into a scene.
That is a good pose.
Yeah. All right. One last thing. So I like to play around with the fill light. That's kind of. So so another thing you can do, if you want a different kind of look, and this will probably be the last thing I'll be able to show you. Let me get a regular reflector. No, that's another episode. But I also like to play with reflectors. Sometimes I'll use a reflector for my fill light. And maybe I'll just bounce. Yeah. I can't really see what I got, but I'd probably put barn doors on it, so I could be a little more strategic. But as I moved this around, it just gives me a lot of different shading I'm not saying it's good. I'm just showing you. Ooh, yeah, he's way
This
down.
is why you like still shots, because when people move, it changes all the lighting.
Well, with the video, that would have worked before I started playing around with the fill light. It would have been fine to move around because people are going to move around. But what I like to do before I start shooting an interview is I'll make sure that the person is standing up straight because a slouch is never attractive. And, I'll say, well, what's your range of movement? What are you comfortable with? And I'll just see if the light works with that. And in this particular case, I really don't like this lighting at all. It's terrible. But, it's another look. Another thing I do sometimes, I guess I have one more quick.
So with the shine on Aldo's face, you won't want to use baby powder. What would you use?
Well, there's darker powders.
Oh, there
Oh,
is?
sure.
Okay.
Oh, sure. So that's why I like to know who's coming into the studio. you know, before I have to light.
Dark baby powder.
Well, you don't use baby powder. You use,
Make a regular makeup.
so I don't use baby powder. No, 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 you don't want to use, you don't want to use baby powder because that's either, well, that's cornstarch now. They used to use talc. But that's going to be really reflective. And you don't, it won't look right. You want to try to use a powder that is going to somewhat match the person's.
Quick question on the backlight.
Yeah?
You're using it more like a focused directional light.
Yeah, it's a hard light. It's a hard
It is
light.
supposed to be hard.
Yeah.
It's always a hard light as opposed to softbox.
Well, you could try with the softbox, but then again, it might be, you're not going to be able to control it as much. And I like to combine hard and soft. In fact, if I was really going to do a shoot, you know, for me, I might even have this half hard and half soft so I can get kind of a different look. You know, you're painting with light basically, and these are just paint brushes.
Nice.
Did they make barn doors for that type of umbrella? They don't do
No, but they make grids.
that. A grid, but I'm saying, yeah, but if you
No,
wanna
no.
direct the light more, no.
No, this is how you would direct the light more. Or you'd use a different kind of fixture. Okay, I'm going to show you one more thing. Sometimes I like to combine, let's see if I have enough cord. Oh, yeah, and I'm going to need a sandbag. Sometimes I like to put the fill light right underneath the key light. And then what I might do to pick up some of that is get a big, well, we have bifolds, you know, like these big white or black cards, you can, like a butterfly. I might want to put that like here so I can catch a little bit of a reflection back onto his face from this light. So let's see what we get. And this takes a little more finesse. Now, where's the switch? Oh, there it is. So now, okay, so he wears glasses. So maybe this isn't the way I would light Aldo. But now I have two catch lights. And you know, you can simulate like he's in a different scene. And this is actually kind of nice. The shadow might still be a little hard there. Oops. Let me see what happens as I move this. See? Can you see the difference? Yeah. So here's another way you can work with your key light and your fill light. So that's it.
All right.
Anybody?